Smith & Wesson's had a runaway hit with the M&P series line of pistols. This example here, the Shield, has been my daily carry for several years. The quality materials and the affordable price point have made it very popular, but there are some simple modifications that you can make that will take this gun to the next level. We're going to talk about doing some trigger modifications to the Shield here in particular, but these modifications should apply to just about every pistol in the M&P lineup. This pistol is loaded with snap cap so that we can safely dry fire it here. One of the main complaints against the M&P series of pistols is that the triggers tend to be overly stagey. They've got lots of little different points in between when you begin pulling the trigger and when the striker finally drops and the trigger breaks. We're going to fix that by polishing up some of the engagement surfaces on the inside here. And the end result is a trigger that has roughly the same weight of pull as the original trigger, but breaks significantly cleaner and is a much smoother trigger to operate overall. So here's an example of that. So we get to the wall here, we pull a little bit, clean, crisp break. You can see it, you can hear it, it breaks very cleanly. We're going to talk about how you can do this at home, and it's not going to cost you more than maybe $5 or $6. Before we've got started, I've disassembled this so that we can get a look at what we're going to be talking about. So here we've got the trigger bar, and it comes back. It's got two engagement surfaces on it, which are going to engage here, which is the striker sear, and it's going to engage here, the firing pin block or firing pin block safety. The other engagement points are going to be this, which is the striker itself, and this, which is the striker sear. As I noted, I should be throwing up a diagram right now that will help to explain the importance of these. This is a simplified diagram of the trigger and striker assembly in your pistol. We have the two elements here of the trigger bar, which are going to come back to engage the striker block and the striker sear. They're going to lift both of those two. Here the trigger bar has been moved back. The striker block and the striker sear have both been impacted. The block has been lifted so that the striker is able to move forward, and the sear has been lifted in the front and dropped in the back so that the striker will move forward. The areas circled in red are the ones that I would recommend polishing. I would avoid doing too much to the areas circled in blue. If you're too aggressive here, you might end up changing the profile more than you'd like, and the striker might drop unintentionally. This is the firing pin block when it's removed from the pistol. Notice the rough machining on the outside, even though I've owned this pistol for a number of years and have shot it extensively. Notice as well that the profile on the top is not very evenly rounded. It's kind of squared off. Compare that with my modified version here. What I did here was I chucked it up in a drill and I used a file in addition to some polishing compound to change the profile of the block so that it's more rounded and so that it has a smoother finish. Here's a picture of the striker itself. You can see on the front where the orange is reflected, an area that I've given a really high polish. Here's another picture of it. You want this surface to be really smooth. Now that we know what we're going to get ourselves into, let's talk about how polished these things are. So what I did was I removed most of these parts from the pistol, and I just used a paper towel and some Mother's magnesium and aluminum wheel polishing compound. It's a really fine compound, so you can get a really nice polished finished, but it doesn't go so fast that you're going to wear down your parts. And to give you an idea of what you're going for here, but you're going to go for a nice mirror polish on top of there and on this surface right here. It's hard to convey over camera, but you can see your reflection in those surfaces. On the underside of the sear here is another good place. You should polish that to a mirror shine as well. Coming over here and looking at the slide, you can see, if we can focus, we can see that the front of this is also polished to a mirror polish. And so is the outside here, the firing pin block. Now the reason you want to round that off is so that instead of the trigger bar engaging it and then all of a sudden dropping it after adding a lot of weight, as you bring it back, it engages it more gradually, and the angle actually changes with time. So the further the trigger bar is back, the more vertical the force it's placing on it is. It's hard to put into terms, but rounding it makes a big difference in how the trigger feels. It's also worth noting that you really don't want to change the dimensions of this. So the actual top of this here should be left pretty well alone, this top surface. So if you're thinking about the way the firing pin block is sitting in here, if you change the distance from here to here, if you change the actual height of it too much, it's possible that when your trigger bar comes back, it won't be able to lift this enough for the striker to come forward all the way. So be sure to not remove too much material from the top. I'll reiterate my caution earlier about changing this surface too much as well. I'm sure some people are out there doing it and have not had any problems, but I would avoid changing the actual angle of this too much. You could polish it probably and make it slicker, but I wouldn't change the angle too much, because the angle of this in combination with the angle of the front of the striker here is such that it's actually pulling the striker back slightly before it drops. That means that the striker is under tension to pull the trigger, and it helps to make the pistol more drop safe. So I wouldn't change the angle of those two engagement surfaces too much. You might be able to get away with polishing the finish here on the sear, but I wouldn't change the engagement angles at all. So go slow, take your time, be careful. And remember that the finer the polish you put on these parts, the better it's going to feel in the end. I cannot overstate how important reprofiling the striker block safety is going to be to the feel of the trigger in the end. So here's to hoping that it works out for you. Once again, I just used Mother's mag wheel polish and some paper towels and Q-tips and things like that. Microfiber cloths are even better. All said and done, I can find the polish at my local Walmart for about $5. You can go to most auto parts stores and pick it up for about $6. It's not very expensive. It's going to take a few hours of time. You'll have to drive out some of the pins. If you want to do the striker block, you're going to have to drive out the rear sight, which is why mine is so ugly. I don't even care if I'm honest. But the end result is a trigger that's smooth and crisp, and it's just worlds better than the factory trigger. Best of luck to you all out there who are going to give it a try. Please let me know how it goes.